Saturday night, but our friend wants to go. So we will go. We will just be around jumping on the bed. So we are at chapter 2 at the fairies. He's just went to put himself straight behind the pillow. So the fairies' Maurice's palace stood at the top of a very high mountain on the way to the moon. It was so near that on summer nights, when the sky was clear, you could plainly see the moon's mountains and valleys, lakes and seas from the terrace of the palace. Here, the fairy studied the stars and read their secrets, for it was long since the art had had anything to teach her. This odd planet no longer interests me, she used to say to her friends, the giants of the mountain. The men upon it still live with their eyes shut. Poor things, I pity them. I go down among them now and then, but it is out of charity, to try and save the little children from the fatal misfortune that awaits them in the darkness. This explains why she had come and knocked at the door of Daddy Steele's cottage on Christmas Eve. And now to return to our travellers. They had hardly reached the high road when the fairy remembered that they could not walk like that through the village, which was still lit up because of the feast. But their store of knowledge was so great that all her wishes were fulfilled at once. She pressed lightly on Tiltil's head and willed that they should all be carried by magic to her palace. Then and there, a cloud of fireflies surrounded our companions and wafted them gently towards the sky. They were at the fairy's palace before they had recovered from their surprise. Follow me, she said, and led them through chambers and passages all in gold and silver. They stopped in a large room surrounded with mirrors on every side and containing an enormous wardrobe with light creeping through its chinks. The fairy Berlin took a diamond key from her pocket and opened the wardrobe. One cry of amazement burst from every throat. Precious stuffs were seen piled one on the top of the other, mantles covered with gems, dresses of every sort and every country, pearl coronets, emerald necklaces, ruby bracelets. Never had the children beheld such riches. As for the teens, their state was rather one of utter bewilderment. And this was only natural when you think that they were seeing the world for the first time and that it showed itself to them in such a queer way. The fairy helped them make their choice. Fire, sugar, and the cat displayed certain indecision of taste. Fire, who only cared for red, at once chose a splendid bright red dress. You should see my bun. With gold spangles, he put nothing on his head, for his head was always very hot. Sugar could not stand anything except white and pale blue. Bright colors jarred on his sweet nature. The long blue and white dress which he selected, and the pointed hat, like a candle extinguisher, which he wore on his head, made him look perfectly ridiculous. But he was too silly to notice it, and kept spinning before the glass like a top and admiring himself in blissful ignorance. The cat, who was always a lady and was used to wear dusky garments, like Lady of the Aristocrats, reflected that black always looks well, in any circumstance, particularly now, when they were traveling without luggage. She therefore put on a suit of black tights, with jet embroidery, hung a long velvet cloak from her shoulders, and perched a large cavalier hat with a long feather on her neat little head. She next asked for a pair of soft kid boots in memory of Puss in Boots, her distinguished ancestor, and put a pair of gloves on her for repose, to protect them from the dust of the roads. Thus attired, she took a satisfied glance at the mirror. Then, a little nervously, with anxious eye and a quivering pink nose, she hastily invited Sugar and Fire to take the air with her. So they all three walked out, while the others went on dressing. Let us follow them for a moment, for we have already grown to like our brave little Tiltil. What are you doing? And we shall, oh la la, and we shall want to hear anything that is likely to help or delay his undertaking. Look at it, look at you, so you're so cute. Thank you for the kisses. After passing through several splendid galleries, hung like balconies in the sky, our three cronies stopped in the hall, and the cat at once addressed the meeting in a hushed voice. I have brought you here, she said, in order to discuss the position in which we are placed. Let us make the most of our last moment of liberty. But she was interrupted by a furious uproar. Wow, wow, wow! There now, cried the cat. That's the idiot of a dog. He has scented us out. We can get a minute's peace. Let us hide behind the balustrade. He had better not hear what I have to say to you. It's too late, said Sugar, who was standing by the door. And sure enough, Tilo was coming up, jumping, barking, painting, and delighted. The cat, when she saw him, turned away in disgust. He has put on the livery of one of the footmen of Cinderella's coach. It is just the thing for him. He has the soul of a flunkey. She ended these words with a f, and stroking her whiskers, took up her stand with a defiant air between Sugar and Fire. The good dog did not see her little game. He was wholly wrapped up in the pleasure of being gorgeously arrayed, and he danced around and around. It was really funny to see his velvet coat whirling like a merry-go-round, with the skirts opening every now and then, and showing his little stumpy tail, which was all the more expressive. Whoop-la! As it had to express itself very briefly. For I need hardly tell you that Tilo, like every well-bred bulldog, had his tail and his ears cropped as a puppy. Poor fellow, he had long and wide the tails of his brother's dogs, which allowed them to use a much larger and more varied vocabulary. But physical deficiencies and the hardships of fortune strengthen our innermost qualities. Tilo's soul, having no outward means of expressing itself, had only gained through silence, and his look, which was always filled with love, had become very eloquent. Silly nice this story. Today, no, amore, vieni. No, sicuro. No, zitta. Today, this big dark guy, you stay here with us. Come. Sotto. You don't want to stay with us a little bit. Today, his big dark eyes glistened with delight. He had suddenly changed, into a man. He was all over magnificent clothes. And he was about to perform a grand errand across the world in company with the gods. There, he said. There, aren't we fine? Just look at this lace and embroidery. It's real gold and no mistake. He did not see that the others were laughing at him, for to tell the truth, he did look very comical. But, like all simple creatures, he had no sense of humor. He was so proud of his natural garment of yellow hair that he had put on no waistcoat, in order that no one might have a doubt as to where he sprang from. For the same reason, he had kept his collar with his address on it, a big red velvet coat, heavily braided with gold lace, reached to his knees, and the large pockets on either side would enable him, he thought, always to carry a few provisions. For Tilo was very greedy. On his left ear he wore a little round cap with an osprey feather in it, and he kept it on his big square head by means of an elastic which cut his fat, loose cheeks in two. His other ear remained free, cropped close to his head in the shape of a little paper screw bag. This ear was the watchful receiver into which all the sounds of life fell, like pebbles disturbing his rest. He had also encased his hind legs in a pair of patent leather riding boots with white tops, but his forepaws he considered of such use that nothing would have induced him to put them into gloves. Tilo had too natural a character to change his little ways all in a day, and, in spite of his new blown honors, he allowed himself to do undignified things. He was at the present moment lying on the steps of the hall, scratching the ground and sniffing at the wall, when suddenly he gave a start and began to whine and whimper. His lower lip shook nervously as though he were going to cry. What's the matter with the idiot now? Asked the cat, who was watching him out of the corner of her eye. But she at once understood. A very sweet song came from the distance. Oh, I wanted to turn it on. And Tilo could not endure music. The song drew nearer. A girl's fresh voice filled the shadow of the lofty arches. I singing too adorably there. Put yourself here. Put yourself here. Look, you're cozy even in here. Put yourself here. The song drew nearer. A girl's fresh voice filled the shadows of the lofty arches, and water appeared. Tall, slender, and white as a pearl, she seemed to glide rather than to walk. Her movements were so soft and graceful that they were suspected rather than seen. A beautiful silvery dress waved and floated around her, and her hair decked with corals flowed below her knees. When fire caught sight of her, like the rude and spiteful fellow that he was, he sneered. She's not brought her umbrella. But water was really quite witty, and who knew that she was the stronger of the two, chaffed at him pleasantly and said, with a glance at his glowing nose, I beg your pardon, I thought you might be speaking of a great red nose I saw the other day. The others began to laugh and poke fun at Fire, whose face was always like a red-hot coal. Fire angrily jumped to the ceiling, keeping his revenge for later. Meanwhile, the cat went up to Water very cautiously and paid her ever so many compliments on her dress. I need hardly tell you that she did not mean a word of it, but she wished to be friendly with everybody, for she wanted their votes to carry out her plan, and she was anxious at not seeing Brad, because she did not want to speak before the meeting was complete. What can he be doing? She mewed, time after time. He was making an endless fuss about choosing his dress, said the dog. At last, he decided in favor of a Turkish robe with a scimitar and a turban. The words were not out of his mouth when a shapeless and ridiculous bulk, clad in all the colors of the rainbow, came and blocked the narrow door of the hall. It was the enormous stomach of Brad who filled the wall opening. He kept on knocking himself without knowing why, for he was not very clever, and besides he was not yet used to moving about in human beings' houses. At last it occurred to him to stoop, and by squeezing through sideways, he managed to make his way into the hall. It was certainly not a triumphal entry, but he was pleased with it all the same. Here I am, he said. Here I am. I have put on Bluebird's finest dress. What do you think of this? The dog began to frisk around him. He thought Brad magnificent. That yellow velvet costume covered all over with silver crescents reminded Tilo of the delicious horseshoe rolls which he loved, and the huge gaudy turban on Brad's head was really very like a fiery bun. With everybody, for she wanted their votes to carry out her plan, and she was anxious at not seeing Brad, because she did not want to speak before the meeting was complete. What can he be doing? She mewed, time after time. He was making an endless fuss. Look, if you put yourself here, it's the same than being down there. Look. He was making an endless fuss about choosing his dress, said the dog. At last, he decided in favor of a Turkish robe, with a scimitar and a turban. You look cozy here. Look, it's cozy the same. No? No. He is right under this pillow. The words were not out of his mouth when a shapeless and ridiculous bulk, clad in all the colors of the rainbow, came and blocked the narrow door of the hall. It was the enormous stomach of Brad who filled the wall opening. Oh, we have read it. It was certainly not a triumphal entry, but he was pleased with it all the same. How nice he looks, he cried. How nice he looks. Brad was shyly followed by Milk. Her simple mind had made her prefer her cream dress to all the finery which the fairy suggested to her. She was really a model of humility. Brad was beginning to talk about the dresses of Tiltil, Light and Mithil, when the cat cut him short in a masterful voice. You shall see them in good time, she said. Stop chattering, listen to me. Time presses, our future is at stake. They all looked at her with a bewildered air. They understood that it was a solemn moment, but the human language was still full of mystery to them. Sugar wriggled his long fingers as a sign of distress. Brad patted his huge stomach. Water lay on the floor and seemed to suffer from the most profound despair. And Milk Collie had eyes for Brad, who had been her friend for ages and ages. The cat, becoming impatient, continued the speech. The fairy has just said it. The end of this journey will, at the same time, mark the end of our lives. It is our business Therefore, to spin the journey out as long as possible and by every means in our power. Bread, who was afraid of being eaten as soon as he was no longer a man, hastened to express approval, but the dog, who was standing a little way off, pretending not to hear, began to growl deep down in his soul. He well knew what the cat was driving at, and when Tylette ended her speech with the words, "We must at all cost prolong the journey and prevent Bluebird from being found, even if it means endangering the lives of the children," the good dog, obeying only the prompting of his heart, leaped at the cat to bite her. Sugar, Bread, and Fire flung themselves between them. "Order, order," said Bread pompously. "I'm in the chair at this meeting." "Who made you chairman?" stormed Fire. "Who asked you to interfere?" asked Water, whirling her wet hair over Fire. "Excuse me," said Sugar, shaking all over in conciliatory tones. "Excuse me, this is a serious moment. Let us talk things over in a friendly way." "I quite agree with Sugar and the cat," said Bread, as though that ended the matter. "This is ridiculous," said the dog, barking and showing his teeth. "There is man, and that's all. We have to obey him and do as he tells us. I recognize no one but him. Hurrah for man, man forever, in life or death, all for man. Man is everything." Lol. But the cat's shrill voice rose above all the others. She was full of grudges against man, and she wanted to make use of the short spell of humanity which she now enjoyed to avenge her war race. "All of us here present," she cried, "animals, things, and elements, possess a soul which man does not yet know. That is why we retain a remnant of independence. But if he finds the blue bird, he will know all, he will see all, and we shall be completely at his mercy. Remember the time when we wandered at liberty upon the face of the earth." But suddenly her face changed, her voice sank to a whisper, and she hissed, "Look out! I hear the fiery and light coming. I need hardly tell you that the light has taken sides with man and means to stand by him. She is our worst enemy. Be careful." But our friends had had no practice in trickery, and feeling themselves in the wrong, took up such ridiculous and uncomfortable attitudes that the fairy, the moment she appeared upon the threshold, exclaimed, "What are you doing in that corner? You look like a pack of conspirators." Quite scared, and thinking that the fairy had already guessed their wicked intentions, they fell upon their knees before her. Luckily for them, the fairy hardly gave a thought to what was passing through their little minds. She had come to explain the first part of the journey to the children and to tell. wait, try now. Here, and to tell each of the others what to do. Look how it goes. Look how it comes. Try to put yourself here. No? To do what to do. Tiltil and Mithil stood hand in hand in front of her, looking a little frightened and a little awkward in their fine clothes. They stared at each other in childish admiration. The little girl was wearing a yellow silk frock embroidered with pink posies and covered with gold spangles. On her head was a lovely orange velvet cap, and a starched muslin jacket covered her little arms. Where do you want to put yourself? Try to put yourself even in here. It's the same that before, behind the peel. Try. Look how it goes. No? because behind there is not the light, is more comfy. He has found, later I will show you why it is. The little girl was wearing a yellow silk frock embroidered with pink posies and covered with gold spangles. On her head was a lovely orange velvet cap, and a starched muslin jacket covered her little arms. Tiltil was dressed in a red jacket and blue knickerbockers, both of velvet, and of course he wore the wonderful little hat on his head. The fairy said to them, "It is just possible that the blue bird is hiding at your grandparents in the land of memory, so you will go there first." But, but how shall we see them if they are dead? Asked Tiltil. Then the good fairy explained that they will not be really dead until their grandchildren cease to think of them. Men do not know this secret, she added, but thanks to the diamond, you, Tiltil, will see that the dead, when we remember, live as happily as though they were not dead. Are you coming with us? Asked the boy, turning to Light, who stood in the doorway and lit up all the hall. No, said the fairy. Light must not look at the past. Her energy must be devoted to the future. The two children were starting on their way when they discovered that they were very hungry. The fairy at once ordered bread to give them something to eat, and that big fat fellow, delighted with the importance of his duty, undid the top of his robe, drew his scimitar, and cut 2 slices out of his stomach. The children screamed with laughter. Tilo drooped his gloomy thoughts for a moment and begged for a bit of bread, and everybody struck up the farewell chorus. Sugar, who was very full of himself, also wanted to impress the company, and, breaking off 2 of his fingers, handed them to the astonished children. As they were all moving towards the door, the fairy Maurice stopped them. Not today, she said. The children must go alone. It will be indiscreet to accompany them. They are going to spend the evening with their late family. Come, be off. Goodbye, dear children, and mind that you are back in good time. It is extremely important. The 2 children took each other by the hand and, carrying the big cage, passed out of the hall, and their companions, at a sign from the fairy, filed in front of her to return to the palace. Our friend Tilo was the only one who did not answer to his name. The moment he heard the fairy say that the children were to go alone, he had made up his mind to go and look after them, whatever happened. And while the others were saying goodbye, he hid behind the door. But the poor fellow had reckoned without the all-seeing eyes of the fairy Berilune. Tilo, she cried, Tilo, here! And the poor dog, who had so long been used to obey, dared not resist the command and came, with his tail between his legs, to take his place among the others. He howled with despair when he saw his little master and mistress swallowed up in the great cold staircase. 3. The Land of Memory. The bunny is in. Maybe if I do like this, you see him. Because it's just there. Now you see him again. You see him? Let's see. There he is. You come here? Look, you can stay here. No? Pulcinetto. Dai, vieni qua, mamma. Oh, you can see his bum. Tutto qui. The Land of Memory.
Put yourself here.
The fairy. No, no way. You just got beyond. Goes beyond. The fairy Berylune had told the children that the land of memory was not far off. But to reach it, you had to go through a forest that was so dense and so old that your eyes could not see the tops of the trees. It was always shrouded in a heavy mist, and the children would certainly have lost their way if the fairy had not said to them beforehand, "It is straight ahead, and there is only one road." The ground was carpeted with flowers, which were all alike. They were snow white pansies and very pretty, but as they never saw the sun, they had no scent. Those little flowers comforted the children, who felt extremely lonely. A great mysterious silence surrounded them, and they trembled a little with a very pleasant sense of fear, which they had never felt before. "Let's take Granny a bunch of flowers," said Matilda. "That's a good idea. She will be pleased," cried the Tiltil. And as they walked along, the children gathered a beautiful white nosegay. The dear little things did not know every pansy, which means a toad, that they picked brought them nearer to their grandparents, and they soon saw before them a large oak with a notice board nailed to it. "Here we are!" cried the boy in triumph, as climbing up on a root he read, "The land of memory." They had arrived, but they turned to every side without seeing a thing. "I can see nothing at all," whimpered Mithil. "I'm cold, I'm tired, I don't want to travel any more." Tiltil, who was fully wrapped up in his errand, liked to do a thing. Wait. Because look where he is. He's right there. You can see him, at least a little bit of him.
Right that I said it, he has put himself away. Ma amore, ma you have to put... Non c'è proprio una buccetta, vieni qui. Oh. Stai qui con noi? Mm? No, eh? No, you can see him. Yeah, a little bit.
So, "Come, don't keep on crying just like water. You ought to be ashamed of yourself," he said. "There, look, look."
He has put himself just right here. Look, maybe you see. No, you don't see not even a pop. Mm.
"The fog is lifting." And sure enough, the mist parted before their eyes, like veils torn by an invisible hand. The big trees faded away. Everything vanished, and instead there appeared a pretty little peasant's cottage, covered with creepers and standing in a little garden, filled with flowers and with trees all over through it. The children at once knew the dear cow in the orchard, the watchdog at the door, the blackbird in his wicker cage, and everything was steeped in a pale light and a warm and balmy air. Tiltil and Mitil stood amazed. So that was the land of memory. What lovely weather it was, and how nice it felt to be there. They at once made up their minds to come back often, now that they knew the way. But how great was their happiness when the last veil disappeared, and they saw, at a few steps from them, Grandad and Granny sitting on the bench, sound asleep. They clapped their hands and called out gleefully, "It's Grandad, it's Granny! There they are, there they are!" But they were a little scared by this great piece of magic, and dared not move from behind the tree. And they stood looking at the dear old couple, who woke up gently and slowly under their eyes. Then they heard Granny, Till, trembling voice, say, "But they were a little, I have a notion that our grandchildren who are still alive are coming to see us today." And Gaffer Till answered, "They are certainly thinking of us, for I feel queer, and I have pins and needles in my legs." "I think they must be quite near," said Granny, "for I see tears of joy dancing before my eyes." And Granny had no time to finish her sentence. The children were in her arms. What a joy! What wild kisses and huggings! What a wonderful surprise! The happiness was too great for words. They laughed and tried to speak and kept on looking at one another with delighted eyes. It was so glorious, so unexpected to meet again like this. When the first excitement was over, they all began to talk at once. "How tall and strong you've grown, Till," said Granny. And Grandad cried, "And me, Till, just look at her, what pretty eyes." And the children danced and clapped their hands and flung themselves by turns into the arms of one or the other. At last they quieted down a little, and Till, nestling against Grandad's chest until Till comfortably, perched on Granny's knees. They began to talk of family affairs. "How are Daddy and Mommy, Till?" asked Granny. "Quite well, Granny," said Till. "They were asleep when we went out." Granny gave them fresh kisses and said, "My word, how pretty they are, and how nice and clean. Why don't you come to see us oftener? It is months and months now that you have forgotten us and that we have seen nobody." "We called them, Granny," said Till, "and today it's only because of the fairy." "We are always here," said Granny Till, "waiting for a visit from those who are alive. The last time you were here was on All Hallows. All Hallows. We didn't go out that day, for we both had colds, but you thought of us, and every time you think of us, we wake up and see you again." Till remembered that the fairy had told him this. He had not thought it possible then, but now, with his head on the heart of the dear Granny whom he had missed so much, he began to understand things, and he felt that his grandparents had not left him altogether. He asked, "So, you are not really dead?" The old couple burst out laughing. When they exchanged their life on earth for another and a much nicer and more beautiful life, they have forgotten. Oh, you saw him. Yes, you can see him. The old couple burst out laughing when they exchanged their life on earth for another and a much nicer and more beautiful life. They have forgotten the word dead. "What does that word dead mean?" asked Gaffer Till. "Why, it means that one's no longer alive," said Till. Grandad and Granny only shrugged their shoulders. "How stupid the living are when they speak of the others," was all they said. And they went over the memories again, rejoicing in being able to chat. "You look like a piece of cloth." You feel the weather that is a little bit hot because it's a little bit buffy. All old people love discussing old times. Look, The future is finished as far as they are concerned, and so they delight in the present and the past. But we are growing impatient like Tiltil, and instead of listening to them, we will follow our little friend's movements. He had jumped off Granny's knees and was poking about in every corner, delighted at finding all sorts of things which he knew and remembered. Nothing is changed, everything is in its old place, he cried. And as he had not been to the old people's home for so long, everything struck him as much nicer. And he added, in the voice of one who knows, only everything is prettier. Hello, that's the clock with the big end which I broke the point off, and the wall which I made in the door, the day I found the Grandad Gimlet. Yes, you've done some damage in your time, said Grandad, and there's the plum tree which you were so fond of climbing when I wasn't looking. Meantime, Tiltil was not forgetting his errand. You haven't the board here by chance, I suppose? At the same moment, Mithil, lifting her head, saw a cage. Ah, that's the old blackbird. Does he still sing? As she spoke, the blackbird woke up and began to sing at the top of his voice. You see, said Granny, as soon as one thinks of him. Tiltil was simply amazed at what he saw. But it's blue, he shouted. Why, that's the bird, the blue bird. He's blue, 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 as a blue glass marble. Will you give him to me? The grandparents gladly consented, and full of triumphs, Tiltil went and fetched the cage, which he had left by the tree. He took hold of the precious bird with the greatest of care, and he began to hop about in his new home. How pleased the fairy will be, said the boy, rejoicing in his conquest. And light too. Come along, said the grandparents. Come and look at the cow and the bees. As the old couple were beginning to toddle across the garden, the children suddenly asked if their little dead brothers and sisters were there too. At the same moment, 7 little children, who up to them had been sleeping in the house, came tearing like mad into the garden. Tiltil and Mithil ran up to them. They all hustled and hugged one another, and danced and whirled about, and uttered screams of joy. Here they are, said Granny. As soon as you speak of them, they are there, the imps. Tiltil caught a little one by the hair. Hello, Pierrot. So we're going to fight again, as in the old days. And Robert, I say, Jane, what's become of your top? Madeleine, and Pierrette and Pauline, and here's Riquet. Mithil laughed. Riquet's still crawling on all fours. Tiltil noticed a little dog yapping around them. That's Kiki, whose tail I cut off with Pauline's scissors. He hasn't changed either. No, said Gaffer Till in a voice of great importance. Nothing changes here. But suddenly, amid the general rejoicings, the old people stopped spellbound. They heard the small voice of the clock indoors strike 8. How's this? They asked. It never strikes nowadays. That's because we no longer think of the time, said Granny. Was anyone thinking of the time? Yes, I was, said Tiltil. So it's 8 o'clock. Then I'm off, for I promised Light to be back before 9. He was going for the cage, but the others were too happy to let him run away so soon. It would be horrid to say goodbye like that. Granny had a good idea. She knew what a little glutton Tiltil was. It was just supper time, and, as luck would have it, there was some capital cabbage soup and a beautiful plum tart. Well, said our hero, as I got a bluebird, and cabbage soup is a thing you don't have every day. They all hurried and carried the table outside, and laid it with a nice white tablecloth, and put a plate for each. And Lastly, Granny brought out the steaming soup tureen instead. The lamp was lit, and the grandparents and grandchildren sat down to supper, jostling. Look where he is, sto piccolo puzzetto. Sat down to supper, jostling and elbowing one another, and laughing and chattering and shouting with pleasure. Then, for a time, nothing was heard but the sound of the wooden spoons noisily clattering against the soup plates. How good it is! Ah, how good it is! Shouted Tiltil, who was eating greedily. I want some more, 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 more. Come, come, a little more quiet, said Grandad. You're just as ill-behaved as ever, and you'll break your plate. Tiltil took no notice of the remark, stood up on his stool, caught hold of the tureen, and dragged it towards him, and upset it, and the hot soup trickled all over the table and down upon everybody's lap. The children yelled and screamed with pain. Granny was quite scared, and Grandad was furious. He dealt our friend Tiltil a tremendous box on the ear. Tiltil was staggered for a moment, and then he put his hand to his cheek with a look of rapture and exclaimed, Grandad, how good, how jolly! It was just like the slaps you used to give me when you were alive. This is not good. I must give you a kiss for it. Everybody laughed. There's more where that came from, if you like them, said Grandad grumpily. But he was touched all the same, and turned to wipe a tear from his eyes. Goodness, cried Tiltil, starting up. There's 8:30 striking. Metil, we've only just got time. Granny in vain implored them to stay a few minutes longer. No, we can't possibly, said Tiltil firmly. I promise it light. And he hurried to take up the precious cage. Goodbye, Grandad, goodbye, Granny, goodbye, brothers and sisters, Pierrot, Robert, Pauline, Madeleine, Riquette, and you too, Kiki. We can't stay. Don't cry, Granny, we will come back often. Poor old Grandad was very much upset and complained lustily. Gracious me, how tiresome the living are, with all their fuss and excitement. Tiltil tried to console him and again promised to come back very often. Come back every day, said Granny. It is our only pleasure, and it's such a treat for us when your toads pay us a visit. This is cute. Goodbye, goodbye, cried the brothers and sisters in chorus. Come back very soon. Bring us some barley sugar. There were more kisses. All waved their handkerchief. All shouted a last goodbye. But the figures began to fade away. The little voices could no longer be heard. The two children were once more wrapped in mist, and the old forest covered them with its great dark mantle. I'm so frightened, whimpered Metil. Give me your hand, little brother. I'm so frightened. Tiltil was shaking too, whimpered Metil. No, wait. But it was his duty to try and comfort and console his sister. Hush, he said. Remember that we are bringing back the bluebird. As he spoke, a thin ray of light pierced the gloom, and the little boy hurried towards it. He was holding his cage tight in his arms, and the first thing he did was to look at his bird. Alas and alack, what a disappointment awaited him! The beautiful bluebird of the land of memory had turned quite black. Stare at it as hard as Tiltil might. The bird was black. Oh, how well they knew the old blackbird that used to sing in its wicker prison in the old days at the door of the house. What had happened? How painful he was, and how cruel life seemed to him just then. He had started Yet started on his journey with such zest and delight that he had not thought for a moment of the difficulties and dangers. Full of confidence, pluck, and kindness, he had marched off, certain of finding the beautiful bluebird, which will bring happiness to the fairy's little girl. And now all his hopes were shattered. For the first time, our poor friend understood the trials, the vexations, and the obstacles that awaited him. Alas, was he attempting an impossible thing? Was the fairy making fun of him? Would he ever find the blue bird? All his courage seemed to believe in him. To add to his misfortunes, he could not find the straight road by which he had come. There was not a single white pansy on the ground, and he began to cry. Luckily, our little friends were not to remain in trouble long. The fairy had promised that the light would watch over them. The first trial was over, and just as outside the old people's house a little while ago, the mist now suddenly lifted. But instead of disclosing a peaceful picture, a gentle, homely scene, he revealed a marvelous temple with a blinding glare streaming from it. On the threshold stood the light, fair and beautiful in her diamond-colored dress. She smiled when Tiltil told her of his first failure. She knew what the little ones were seeking. She knew everything, for light surrounds all mortals with her love, though none of them is fond enough of her ever to receive her truly, and thus to learn all the secrets of truth. Now, for the first time, thanks to the diamond which the fairy had given to the boy, she was going to try and conquer a human soul. Do not be sad, she said to the children. Are you not pleased to have seen your grandparents? Is that not enough happiness for one day? Are you not glad to have restored the old blackbird to life? Listen to him singing. For the old blackbird was singing with might and main, and his little yellow eyes sparkled with pleasure as he hopped about his big cage. As you look for the blue bird, dear children, accustom yourself to love the grey birds which you find on your way. She nodded her fair head gravely, and it was quite clear that she knew where the blue bird was. But life is often full of beautiful mysteries which we must respect, lest we shall destroy them. And if Light had told the children where the bluebird was, well, they will never have found him. I will tell you why at the end of this story. And now let us leave our little friends to sleep on beautiful white clouds under Light's watchful care. This story is so beautiful. Now I will have a little pause and I will come back with another chapter in part 3. Bye bye, and I'm really, really loving this.